Hello class, my name is Philip Bradford and this is my presentation on great leaders. Let me start out by asking you, who runs your ship? My report is on Captain Michael Abrashoff. Now he was a captain in the U.S. Navy and he's also the author of the book, It's Your Ship. He was the commander of the USS Benfold, which was a U.S. Navy fighter ship. It's a guided missile destroyer. It's named after a U.S. Marine named Edward Clyde Benfold. He was killed in 1952 while diving on a hand grenade and saving others' lives. Captain Abrashoff was born in Altoona, Pennsylvania. He is the sixth of 7 children. His father, Don, and all his uncles was in the U.S. military. His mother, Mary, was a school teacher. And he's a 1982 graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy with a degree in political science. So, what shaped Captain Abrashoff? Life before Benfold. Now, he was a U.S. Navyman, and he went through and did different things. But in 1994, he was named Assistant to the Defense Secretary William Perry. And he says it's at this time that he served with Self-Defense Secretary Perry, and that's where he learned how to lead. One of his jobs was to cut and save money of the taxpayers. And so he learned how to do that and did it very well. But one thing he saw while there was the rising numbers in the sailors that they were losing. And he wanted to do something about that. So when he was promoted to captain, he got his first ship, and it was the USS Benfold. At the time, the Benfold was listed as one of the worst ships in the U.S. Navy. Not the worst, like 3rd or 4th on the list. But out of all the ships in the Navy, that was pretty bad. And he was saying, how am I going to turn this around? He took command in June of 1997, and he was there for 20 months. When they were having the ceremony for him to come and take the ship over, and the captain that had been running it was coming off, they were having the ceremony for the captain that had been running it. And he gave this long, drawn-out speech, and then he and his family get up and they leave the ship. And he said he remembers as that captain left the ship, the entire crew stood up and applauded and cheered loudly, glad that he was leaving. They couldn't stand it. And they were so happy, and the cheers were for him to leave. And he thought then, I don't want that to be me. So what he did when he came on, he interviewed every crew member on the ship. There were 310 of them. So as he did these interviews, he thought when he came on Benfold, he knew the problems. And he wanted to explain the mission, his mission for Benfold. But then he soon realized as he talked to the first few sailors and crew members that he didn't know the problems at all. So he added 3 questions. The first question he added was, what do you like most about working here? The second question, what don't you like about working here? And then the third question, he says, if you were the captain of this ship, what would you change? And what he found out was some very good things. Things he learned from these interviews were, first, the kids were joining the military because they wanted to go to college. A lot of them were poor and they just wanted that GI Bill. So what he did was he brought the SAT testing to his ship, and he allowed anyone that wanted to take it there. And at the time, the top SAT score was 1,600. And one of his girls, a 19-year-old girl, who all she did on the ship was paint the deck. A menial job. She scored a 1490 on her SAT. And he thought right then, I have got some very bright kids on this ship, and I'm going to listen to them and what their ideas are. Another guy says, Captain, let me ask you this. Have you ever painted your house? And he says, yeah, I have. And he said, it sucks, don't it? And he says, actually it does. He said, well, let me tell you, we paint this ship every other month. He says, we paint this ship 6 times a year. And he says, we're always painting the ship. And he says, well, there's nothing I can do about that. We've been painting ships for 285 years in the Navy. And he says, well, the top side of the ship is made up of ferrous metals. It rusts. Let me ask you something, Captain. Have you ever heard of stainless steel? And the captain's like, wow. So he calls and he finds every nut, bolt, screw, washer, all across the U.S., and he has stainless steel shipped to his ship, and they change it all out. Then they painted the ship, and they didn't have to paint it again for 10 months. Now, every ship in the U.S. Navy has stainless steel on the upper deck, and they don't have to paint the ship but once a year. It has saved the Navy thousands and thousands of dollars, all because he listened to a 19-year-old kid. They just wanted to be heard. They had good ideas, and they just wanted to be heard. So, what was Captain Abershoff's accomplishments? One, he knew right away from these interviews that he had to see the Benfold through the eyes of the crew. He led by example. One time they were doing a training exercise, and there were 3 ships, 3 Navy ships, and the other 2 captains of the other ships were senior captains to him. Well, 2 days into it, they're waiting on a submarine to attack them in the training exercise, and they still don't have a plan. So he tells his crew members, y'all devise a plan. And when they brought it to him, he was so excited of how great this plan was. So the day before the exercise was to take place, one of the captains gives the plan out. And it was a horrible plan. So he presents his crew's plan. He says, let's have this plan. And they said, no, we're not doing that plan. We don't like it. He says, but this plan is so much better. No, we're not doing it. He comes back again. He still fights. I want to do this plan. No, they said, we're not doing it. So they used the plan that the senior captain gave, and during the drill, all 3 ships were sunk. But here's the big kicker. When he was arguing with the other captains, it was over the radio, ship to ship, and every crew member on his ship heard it. And what they heard was him fighting for them, for their idea. Even though they didn't listen, they believed in him. He led by example. He applied the Washington Post test. He said, if I make a decision, and it was on the front page of the Washington Post tomorrow, would I be proud of that decision? And so that's something that he led by. Now, going to Northhouse, to some of our studies, Captain Abershoff's leadership style would be a transformational leadership style. Now, that's one of the most popular leadership styles today in the workforce. Some of the things that goes along with that is the Benfold was always clear of their objectives. The way he led, they always knew where they were going. And when you have a large group of people going a certain direction, it's good that everybody knows where we're going so we can get there a lot easier. They incorporated the followers in the process. He let them lead, and he gave them authority to make decisions, and therefore they bought in. He gave attention to the growth of the followers. You know, I said he helped them to obtain their college degrees. He helped them to rise up through the ranks in the military. If we look at the other leadership styles we talked about, he would be closest to a democratic leadership style. He involved the subordinates in the decision making. He delegated authority. The leaders in that leadership style delegates authority. And he did this on the Benfold. And the communication is active upward and downward. And so this is what made him such a great leader. So let me ask you this. How do you want to leave? When he was leaving off the Benfold and the other captain was taking over, he says he gave the shortest speech in the history of the U.S. Navy. He said 5 words. When he was standing up in front of all his crew members, he said, "You know how I feel." And he turned and walked off. And as he walked down that walkway onto the pier, he says he didn't hear anything. And he says he was kind of worried. You know, were they going to cheer? He's waiting because he remembered the last captain. And he says he turned and looked back, and they were all crying. And so I ask you, how would you like to leave? To cheers or to tears. I'm Philip Bradford, and this is my presentation. Thank you.